The sky still grumbled with the last of the storm's anger as Jedediah Ward rode the southern ridge of his property, reins slack in one hand, Winchester across his lap. The prairie grass bowed low, slick with rain, and the air was heavy with the sharp scent of wet earth and horse sweat. His gelding, old Dusty, picked his way through the mud, hooves squelching with each step. Jed didn't talk much, not to men, and certainly not to horses, but the silence after a storm always pulled words from deep places. He was about to turn back when something caught his eye near the fence line, something that didn't belong. A dark shape slumped at the post, still as the grave. He clicked his tongue, nudging Dusty forward, every inch of him tensing as he approached. For a second, he thought it might be a dead cowfuntal he saw the hair. It was a girl, a child. Jed swung down from the saddle, boots sinking ankle-deep into the mud. The girl was tied to the fence post with coarse rope, her arms bound behind her and a bruise blooming across her jaw like spilled ink. Her dress, once probably a soft blue, clung to her in soaked tatters. Her head lolled forward, chin resting on her chest. Too still, too quiet. He knelt beside her, calloused fingers checking her pulse at the neck. It fluttered weakly beneath his touch, but it was there. Alive. Just barely. Pinned to her collar was a scrap of paper. Torn. Smeared with rain, but the words were still legible. "She ain't mine no more." Jed stared at it for a long moment, something bitter rising in his throat. He'd seen cattle left to starve, dogs abandoned on roads, even men shot and left to rot in creek beds. But this was different. This was a child. 15, maybe younger. With a grunt, he reached for his knife, slicing the rope with practiced hands. Her arms fell limp, wrists raw and red. She didn't wake, just gave a soft, broken exhale like a kicked hound. Carefully, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees. She weighed nothing, a sack of bones and storm water. Dusty stood steady as Jed lifted her into the saddle, positioning her sideways across it with a gentleness he hadn't needed in years. His old bones creaked, but he mounted behind her, cradling her weight as the horse turned north toward the cabin. The wind picked up as they rode, cold, sharp. It stung his cheeks and carried the smell of rot and wet pine. The girl shivered once, then went still again. Jed kept his eyes on the horizon. There were questions to ask: who she was, what had happened, why someone would tie a child to a fence and walk away, but none of them mattered just yet. Right now, there was only one question worth answering. Could she be saved? He adjusted his coat around her small frame as the cabin came into view, smoke still curling from the chimney, a weak promise of warmth. The girl stirred faintly, her lips moving in sleep, but no sound came out. Jed kept one hand on the reins, the other holding her steady. "You're safe now," he muttered under his breath, as much to her as to the wind. "Or at least, safer than you were." And with that, Jed Ward rode into the rain-soaked dusk, carrying a stranger he hadn't asked for, down a trail that neither of them knew would change everything. The cabin was quiet but for the ticking of the old mantel clock and the soft hiss of firewood settling in the hearth. Rain tapped gently on the roof, slower now, a tired rhythm after the storm. Jed Ward sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee gone cold, eyes flicking toward the bed in the far corner of the room. The girl hadn't stirred an hour's knot since he'd carried her in, peeled off her soaked clothes with careful hands, and wrapped her in the only dry blanket he had left. She looked too small for the cot, her face half buried in flannel, limbs drawn tight like a wounded animal. Then her eyes opened. It was sudden, sharp, alert, feral. Wide brown eyes scanned the cabin like they didn't know what year it was, her breath hitching in panic. She sat up too fast and winced, one hand flying to her temple. Jed didn't move, just watched, slow and steady, the way a man does when he's around skittish horses. "Where the hell am I?" she croaked, voice raw. Jed set his mug down with a quiet clink. "Cabin. My place. You were tied up. I cut you loose." Her eyes narrowed. "You brought me here?" I did. Why? He paused, considered. Figured leaving you out in the mud wouldn't sit right. She swung her legs off the cot, movements stiff, and tried to stand, then collapsed back onto the bed, clutching her ribs. She spat in the corner and glared at him. You're just another man. That it? Found a girl tied up, figured she'd owe you something now? Jed's jaw worked once, but he didn't rise. Ain't asking you for anything. She snorted. Yeah, sure. He stood then, slow and measured, and walked over to the table. From a tin, he pulled out a few slices of dry bread, poured water into a tin cup, and set both on the table near the hearth, closer to her than to him. Then he stepped back and returned to his chair. That's yours. Take it or don't. She didn't move, just kept watching him like he might lunge. After a long minute, she dragged herself off the cot, one slow foot after the other, and snatched the bread with the speed of someone who'd gone too long without. She didn't thank him. She didn't sit down. She ate standing, hunched over, eyes never leaving him. You got a name? He asked, voice low. May, she said around a bite. That short for something? None of your business. Jed nodded once. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled. The wind howled once, far off in the trees. May finished the bread and drank half the water, then set the cup down and retreated to the cot. She didn't look back. Jed didn't try to talk again. He just sat there, coffee cooling even more, watching the shadows shift across the walls. May curled beneath the blanket, one eye still open. She didn't trust him, he knew that, might never, but she hadn't run, that was something. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is surviving the first night. The morning sun filtered through the single window of the cabin, pale and hesitant. It lit the dust in the air, catching on the rough wood walls, the iron stove, the boots by the door. Jed Ward sat on the edge of the porch sharpening his knife, slow and steady, the sound of steel on stone scraping like a heartbeat. Behind him, inside the cabin, he heard movement. The floorboards creaked, a cough, the unmistakable rustle of someone trying to move without being noticed. May stepped out onto the porch not long after, squinting against the light. She wore one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and a pair of patched trousers cinched at the waist with twine. They hung off her frame like they didn't belong to anybody at all. Jed didn't look at her right away. He kept sharpening. You could have left me there, she said finally. Could've, Jed agreed. She didn't say thank you. Just stood there, barefoot, arms crossed, staring out at the prairie like it owed her something. When Jed did look up, it was because she shifted, scratching at her forearm. The fabric pulled back slightly, and he caught sight of the burns. Round, uniform. Cigarette marks. Not fresh, but not old either. And just below her jaw, a scar pale and thin, cutting across her skin like a misplaced smile. His jaw tightened. He didn't ask, wouldn't, but something in his chest ached, slow and deep. She caught him looking. What? Nothing. She narrowed her eyes. You gonna ask me about them? No. Why not? Everyone wants to ask. Jed wiped the blade on his pant leg and set it aside. Because it ain't my right to know, and you'll tell it when you want, if you want, or you won't. May blinked. Like she didn't expect that answer. Like she'd prepared for a fight, and someone had taken the gun from her hand. You always this quiet? She asked. Only when I got nothing worth saying. She studied him for a moment longer, then sat on the edge of the porch a few feet away. Her body was still tense, shoulders hunched, but the defiance in her eyes had cooled into something more cautious. Watchful. Your folks nearby? He asked after a while. She shook her head. Don't have folks. Not really. Jed didn't push, he just nodded. Well, you're here now. I got fences that need mending and a pump that leaks like hell. If you're gonna stay, I reckon you could lend a hand. She turned to him slowly. You want me to work? I want you to earn your place, same as anyone. Ain't charity, May, but it's a place. Food, bed, quiet. She mulled it over, teeth pressing into her lower lip. You don't want anything else? No, he said simply. Just help, if you want it. She glanced down at her burned arm, then out at the open land that rolled beyond the fence line. After a long silence, she muttered, Fine, I'll work. And in that word, in the stubborn tilt of her head, and the way her fingers curled into fists, Jed saw it the first crack in the armor. The beginning. Not trust, not yet. But the first nail in the wall between them. And maybe, just maybe, the first sign that she wasn't planning on running. The days unfolded in slow, steady rhythms, like the ticking of the mantel clock, like hoofbeats over dirt. Mornings began early, before the sun broke across the prairie, the sky still that dusty gray color that promised heat later. Jed would be up first, boiling coffee on the stove, the smell thick in the small cabin. He never woke her, didn't have to. May rose with the sound of his boots on the porch, always alert, always silent. She'd pull on the same oversized shirt, cinch the rope belt, and meet him outside, squinting against the dawn. She didn't talk much, not unless spoken to, but she worked. Jed gave her simple tasks at first, hauling water from the well, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, things he'd once done alone in silence, but now watched her do with quiet precision. She didn't complain, didn't ask questions, but she watched him, always. Her eyes were like flint, sharp, sparking when he came too close or moved too fast. She never flinched, but she braced, just slightly, like a barn cat unsure if the hand coming down meant a pat or a slap. Jed saw it every time. That instinct, that waiting. He didn't try to fix it. Instead, he kept to his pace low, deliberate, calm. When he taught her to split kindling, he handed her the hatchet and stood a good 10 feet back. Line it up. Let the weight of the blade do most the work, he said, his voice low and even. She tried once, twice, her grip too tight, her aim wild. On the third swing, the log split clean. She looked at him then, waiting for a word of praise or a joke or maybe a warning. He just nodded. Good. When the fences needed mending, he showed her how to pull taut the wire, how to drive a post deep enough that it held through winter wind. Her hands bled the first day. She didn't say a word. That night, he left a tin of salve on the table without comment. The next morning, her hands were bandaged. She rode behind him on Dusty once, but the next time he simply offered her the reins. Try bareback, he said. Helps you feel the rhythm. She eyed him suspiciously but climbed on. The horse twitched under her. She gritted her teeth and rode anyway. Jed didn't hover, didn't correct her unless necessary. And when she fell, which she did more than once, he didn't rush over. Just waited. She always got back up, mud on her knees, fire in her jaw. Still, the tension remained. A string stretched tight between them. She watched him out of the corner of her eye when he chopped wood, when he cleaned his rifle, when he took his coffee by the porch. Watching for signs, for a shift in tone, for the moment the catch would come, the part where kindness had a price. But it never did. He treated her the same way every day, like a person, like someone who had a name, who had a choice, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe it. Not trust him, not yet. But believe that, for now, the world wasn't about to turn on her. In the quiet of those long days, with the wind rolling through the grass and the sky wide above them, May didn't smile. But she didn't run either. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she stood a little taller. The storm came in fast, like most things that didn't ask permission on the plains. One moment the sky was a wide bowl of blue and gold. The next it boiled over with clouds the color of gunmetal, wind howling like a wounded thing through the trees. Jed had been tying down the feed tarps behind the barn when the first crack of thunder split the sky. Dusty whinnied and stomped in his pen. The chickens scattered, feathers flying. The air turned heavy with the smell of rain and old lightning. When he got back to the cabin, the door stood open. The coffee pot on the stove was still warm. May's coat was gone. Her boots, too. Jed swore under his breath. He checked the well, the chicken coop, the line of trees near the back fence. Nothing. The wind was picking up now, throwing grit in his face, hurling dry leaves like knives across the yard. He moved toward the barn, one hand on the knife at his belt, not out of fear but habit. The place had ghosts. May had ghosts. He'd learned enough to know the kind of storm outside was never as bad as the ones inside her head. The barn door groaned open under his weight. Inside, it smelled of hay, horses, and the sudden ozone bite of rain. Thunder rolled again, closer. He stepped in slow, boots crunching over straw, eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the wood slats. Then he heard it. The soft click of a rifle hammer being pulled back. His eyes snapped up to the loft. She was there crouched, low in the corner. Jed's old hunting rifle clutched tight in her hands. Her knuckles were white. Her whole body shook, soaked through from the rain, hair wild and stuck to her face. Her eyes were wide with something raw and ancient terror born from memory, not reason. "Don't come up here," she screamed, voice cracking. "I swear I'll shoot, don't you touch me." Jed stopped cold. His heart pounded, but he kept his voice low, steady, no anger, no sharpness, just enough to cut through the wind. "I ain't here to hurt you, May." She didn't lower the gun. She didn't blink. "I won't raise my voice," he said. "I won't raise my hand, but I ain't leaving you up here in the dark." She trembled, arms locked tight, eyes glassy with unshed tears. Thunder cracked again, louder this time, and she flinched so hard the barrel wobbled. Jed did the only thing he could. He knelt, right there in the straw and dust. Hands open, palms up, like he was praying. "Whatever you think's happenin', it ain't," he said gently. "This ain't then. This ain't him. This is me, and I ain't goin' nowhere." For a long time, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof. Then the gun lowered an inch. Then, another. Her fingers slipped from the stock. She crumpled forward, arms wrapped around her knees, face hidden. The first sob came out like a cough. Then another. She cried like it hurt, like it broke something open inside her she didn't know was still locked. Jed stayed there on the dirt, head bowed, not saying a word. It was the first time he'd seen her weep. And in a strange, quiet way, it felt like the storm had broken in both of them. Bent Ridge wasn't much to look at, a crooked line of storefronts and wagons, dusty plank sidewalks, and a wide street worn down by hooves and hard years. But to May, riding into it was like stepping into a cage. Her back stayed stiff in the saddle, fingers clutched tight around the pommel, eyes darting left and right, like a hunted animal. Jed rode beside her, hat low over his brow, a quiet presence as steady as the gelding beneath him. They hadn't spoken much that morning, just packed the list flour, beans, nails, lamp oil and saddled up. Jed said it was time May saw town, learned the ropes, figured what kind of place the world was beyond the ranch. She hadn't argued, but her silence had weight in it. The moment they reached the edge of town, the stares started. A woman with a basket paused mid-step. A ranch hand tipped his hat, then turned to whisper to the man beside him. A boy on a barrel stared openly until his mother yanked him by the collar. The air changed, tightened. It wasn't the kind of silence that asked questions. It was the kind that already had answers. Ugly ones. Jed dismounted outside Creighton's general store and tied the horses. "Come on," he said softly. "Won't take long." May followed, steps small and sharp, her chin lifted high like a blade. She walked beside him, not behind, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed every step. Inside, the store was quiet, save for the creak of wood and the shuffle of a clerk pretending not to watch. Jed went straight to the counter, pulling the list from his pocket. May trailed behind, her eyes flicking across shelves she hadn't seen in over a year. Canned peaches, bolts of faded fabric, bars of lye soap. Then the voice came. Well, I'll be damned. Thought I recognized that face. May froze. The man behind the counter was in his 40s, short and squat, with a gut that strained his vest buttons and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't expect to see her again, he continued. That McAllister girl. You get lost, sweetheart? Or just get tired of running? Jed turned slowly. May didn't move. Not a twitch. The man leaned on the counter, eyes gleaming. You know there's a bounty hunter been asking around. Fella with a scar across his lip. Said she stole from her daddy and lit out. Said she's got a mean streak. Jed didn't say a word. Instead, he stepped between them, broad and calm, and wrapped his arm around May's shoulders. She flinched but didn't pull away. We'll take what's on the list, Jed said, voice flat. And if you've got something to say, he added, meeting the man's eyes with a stare like cold steel, say it when the girl's not here to hear it. The man blinked, looked away. Outside, as they stepped back into the hot glare of midday, May's breath came shallow. Her jaw was tight. She didn't speak until they reached the horses. You should have let me go, she whispered. I can't stay if people know. Jed paused mid-mount, then looked down at her. You can stay, and I don't give a damn what they know. She looked up at him, uncertainty written in the lines of her face. Jed tipped his hat low. Let him murmur, let him rot. You're coming home with me. And for the first time, May didn't just follow. She walked beside him, all the way out of town. The ride back from Bent Ridge was quiet, but not the kind of quiet Jed Ward liked. It was tight, bitter, like a storm trying to hold itself together. May didn't say a word the entire way home, not even when Dusty spooked at a jackrabbit darting across the trail. She just gripped the reins with white knuckles, jaw clenched, eyes staring dead ahead. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was dipping behind the hills, stretching the shadows long across the yard. Jed unsaddled the horses in silence, waiting, listening. May stood by the barn, her arms crossed over her chest, body wound like wire. She didn't move toward the cabin, didn't offer to help, just stood there, staring at nothing. Jed walked over, slow. You want to talk about it? He asked gently. She shook her head, but her chin quivered. Her arms tightened. He saw it building like pressure under a cork. He waited. Then it broke. He used to hit me when he couldn't find his whiskey, she said, voice sharp and flat. Cole McAllister, that was my father. Thought he was big and mean because he had a pickaxe and fists like bricks. Jed didn't interrupt, just let her keep going. He'd say I was mouthy, said I looked too much like my mother. She died when I was 9. After that, it got worse. Drunk all the time. Meaner when he was sober. Her eyes brimmed now, but she blinked hard to stop them. I told him I was going to leave one day. That I'd find work, get out. He laughed. Told me girls like me don't get out. We get sold. Or buried. Then one night, I said I hated him. She looked down at her hands. So he tied me to the fence. Left me there. Said the coyotes could have what wasn't his anymore. Jed felt something crawl up his spine. Not rage, something colder, something quiet. May looked at him now. Really looked. Eyes rimmed red. He's looking for me. That bounty hunter in town? That's him. Just with someone else's gun. So if you want me gone, if you're afraid of trouble. Stop, Jed said. She did. He stepped closer, slow but firm, until they stood just feet apart. The wind tugged at her hair, blew dust across the porch steps behind them. Jed looked her square in the eyes. You ain't property. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Not his, not mine, not anybody's. He said it slow, solid, like the truth didn't need raising voices to be heard. You're your own. May's breath hitched, her shoulders trembled, then gave out as she dropped to her knees in the dirt like something in her had gone slack. I don't know who that is, she whispered. I don't know who I am if I ain't scared. Jed lowered himself beside her, hands on his knees. Then we figure it out, right here. She didn't nod, didn't speak again. But she didn't pull away when he laid a hand gently on her shoulder. And in that stillness, as the wind rustled the dry grass and the prairie night rolled in slow and wide, something changed. Not everything, but enough. The fire had burned low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls, when the horses started to stir. A sharp snort. The jangle of a bridle. Jed's eyes snapped open before the sound even fully registered. Years of sleep broken by trouble had trained his body well. He rose from the chair by the dying fire, hand already reaching for the rifle resting against the doorframe. The clock ticked in the quiet, but outside the wind had stilled. Too still. May was already at the window, barefoot, hair tangled from sleep, holding her breath like it might give her answers. I saw something, she whispered. Jed joined her, peering through the glass. The moon was fat and high, painting the yard in silver and shadow. Near the edge of the barn, just past the hitching post, a shape moved too slow to be animal, too careful to be innocent. Jed's jaw tightened. You stay here, he said. No, she replied, already moving. He sent someone. I know it. Jed didn't argue. There was steel in her voice, and she moved with the same silent certainty she always had when trouble was near. He passed her one of the smaller riflessa repeater with a short barrel end, nodded toward the back door. They slipped out, boots silent on the dirt, the chill of night clinging to their skin. The figure moved again, closer this time, just beside the barn's north wall. Jed raised his rifle, but didn't call out yet. He stepped forward slowly, May at his side, gun tight against her chest. Then the figure stepped into the moonlight, and the shine off the revolver at his hip caught both their eyes. You don't want to do this, Jed called out. The man froze, halfway between motion and menace. He was tall, lean, face rough as sandpaper and eyes like bottle glass. A scar slashed across his lip like it was carved there with purpose. Name's Trask, he said, voice low. Bounty's not personal, just a job. You're on my land, Jed replied. That makes it personal. She's McAllister's. He paid good coin to get her back. May stepped forward now, rifle raised, hands trembling but eyes locked on Trask, with something new behind them. I ain't his anything, she said, loud and clear. Trask looked at her, smiled. You're just a runaway girl with a price on her head. Wrong, May hissed and fired. The shot cracked through the night and missed by a hand's breadth, splintering the fence post beside him. Trask flinched and reached for his gun. Jed didn't miss. One shot from the Winchester roared through the dark, striking Trask in the chest and sending him staggering backward. He hit the dirt hard, eyes wide in surprise. Blood spread beneath him like spilled ink. Silence fell. Even the night birds seemed to hold their breath. Jed stepped forward, checked for breath. There wasn't any. May lowered her rifle slowly, arms shaking now that the fire had passed. He was gonna take me, she said, voice barely audible. Was, Jed said simply. Ain't anymore. They buried the body by the edge of the property line, where the scrub grew thick, and the wind never stopped moving. No marker, no words. When they returned to the porch, May sat on the steps, staring out at the barn. I didn't mean to miss, she said. Jed sat beside her, resting the rifle across his knees. You fired first. That's what mattered. She didn't reply, but in the hard set of her jaw, in the glint of something fierce in her eyes, Jed saw the fire McAllister tried to kill. And it was just getting started. The cabin was quiet again, but not with the same tension that had gripped it in the weeks before. The kind of quiet now was weighted more with thought than fear, like the air before a decision that mattered. May sat at the kitchen table, her hands resting on the paper Jed had set before her. The pencil trembled slightly in her grip, though her jaw was set firm. You don't have to tell it all, Jed said gently from across the table. Only what you're ready to. I want to, May answered, her voice low. It's just hard to make it real when it's all in my head. Writing it down makes it stick. Jed nodded. Then stick it. The truth matters. It had been 4 days since they buried Trask. 4 days of silence from town, of no more riders on the ridge, no strange tracks in the dust. But they both knew it wasn't over until someone in a badge or a black robe made it so, and that meant telling the law everything. She bent her head and began to write. To Judge Emmett Sloan, she began, the letters uneven but determined. The words came slow at first, but then faster like a wound opening. She wrote of the beatings, the nights without food, the cigarette burns, the way McAllister would laugh when she cried. She described the fence, the rope, the way she was left in the rain like an animal. She wrote of the bounty hunter, of fear, of the shot that missed. When she was finished, her hand ached, and her eyes were hot. Jed looked it over in silence, only nodding at the end. You did good. They rode into Bent Ridge the next morning. May wore her hair pulled back, her shoulders straight. Jed kept the letter in his coat pocket, folded clean. The townsfolk still stared, but less now. Like they'd heard about Trask. Like maybe the story had changed. At the sheriff's office, Sheriff Dobbins glanced up from his desk as they stepped in. Ward, he said with a slight nod. Then he looked at May, McAllister's girl. May didn't flinch. Jed handed him the letter. Dobbins read it slow, lips tightening. When he finished, he looked up. Judge Sloan 'll see this, he said. But I'll tell you what he'll say, and I'll put my own name under it. He pulled out a file from his drawer. McAllister crossed into Montana 2 days after that bounty hunter didn't come back. I got word from a deputy near Bozeman Hayes running from more than just you. May stared. So I'm free? The sheriff leaned back. Far as the law's concerned, no man owns you. Not anymore. Outside, the air was warmer, the wind gentler than before. Jed untied the horses while May stood in the middle of the road like someone learning how to breathe different. You got a choice now, Jed said as they mounted up. Your name's clean. You could go anywhere. I'll stake you if you want. May looked at him, her face unreadable for a long stretch of silence. Then she said, simply, I'm already where I want to be. Jed gave a small nod, and together they turned the horses toward home. The dust kicked up behind them, soft in the light, fading like the last shadow of a man who no longer mattered. The prairie was golden that morning, sun rising slow and wide over the horizon, laying its light across the grass like a warm hand. The wind carried the scent of dust and horses, sweet hay and sweat. Spring had come early to the Dakota Plains, and with it came the sound of hooves, the clatter of harnesses, and May's voice cutting clean through the morning air. Push him left, she shouted, waving her hat in a wide arc. That calf's got too much fight in it, keep him from doubling back. 2 ranch hands scrambled to follow, laughing as they herded a stubborn young steer back toward the pasture gate. May rode ahead, seated clean and straight atop a lean chestnut mare, her face sun-browned, her braid whipping behind her like a banner. She looked nothing like the girl Jed had found months agateed to a fence, hollow-eyed, worn to the bone. That girl had been carved from fear and spit and grit. This one? She was carved from fire. Jed leaned on the fence rail, watching her with quiet pride, hands rough and calloused, sun in his eyes. The ranch had changed since May's arrival. The barn roof was patched now, the pasture gates repaired, and the old well pump finally replaced. They had more cattle this year, more help too. But nothing marked the change so clearly as the way May carried herself confident, capable, alive. She swung off the horse after the cattle were penned, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Jed handed her a canteen. Got a hand on you, girl, he said. May smirked, just trying to keep up with the old man. They sat in the grass beneath the shade of the old cottonwood, passing the water back and forth. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind built over hard work and quiet trust. After a while, Jed stood, brushing dirt off his pants. Got something I want to show you. He led her across the pasture to the far end of the property where the land dipped and rolled into a wide open stretch of field. A new fence stood there, fresh pine posts, solid and straight, painted white like a clean breath after winter. At the end of the row, a single post stood taller than the rest, the top carved smooth, words etched deep in the wood. May's line. May stared at it, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. The wind kicked up around them, tugging at her shirt, rustling the tall grass. "This where I found you," Jed said quietly. "Where someone tried to leave you behind." She stepped closer, ran her fingers over the carved letters. Her voice, when it came, was soft. "And now?" Jed nodded toward the post. "Now it marks where you started, where you chose to begin again." May didn't speak right away. She looked out over the fence, the land stretching far and wide, sky endless above it. Then she turned to Jed, eyes steady, shining. "I think I'll keep building from here." Jed smiled, a rare thing. "Then it's a good line." And together, beneath the morning sun, beside a fence no one would ever tie her to again, May stood tall on her side of the world, her side of the line, her home,